In the sweltering heat of a desert night, Samantha Sam Rivera revved the engine of her motorcycle as she sped along a dusty highway, the hum of her bike cutting through the heavy silence. The distant glow of neon signs hinted at a nearby town, yet the vast barren landscape seemed to belong solely to the night. Known throughout the Southwest for her fearless independence and rebellious spirit, Sam was more than just a rider. She was a symbol of freedom, defying both the law and the chaos of the world around her. As the moon cast elongated shadows over the rugged terrain, a sudden flash of headlights shattered the quiet. A convoy of sleek black vehicles tore past, their glaring beams momentarily overwhelming Sam's vision. In that fleeting moment of disorientation, a deep sense of foreboding settled over her. Something was amiss, something that went far beyond the usual dangers of the open road. Out of the darkness, a group of masked men emerged, their figures materializing like specters from the shadows. "Stop right there!" barked one of them, his voice icy and commanding. Instinctively, Sam slammed on her brakes, her heart pounding in her chest as she found herself encircled by these mysterious assailants. Amid the chaos, her keen eyes caught sight of a chilling detail. One of the attackers bore a tattoo, a symbol so oddly familiar that it sent a shiver down her spine, a mark she had only ever heard whispered about in family legends. For a suspended moment, time seemed to slow. Questions swirled in Sam's mind. Who were these men, and what did that enigmatic symbol mean? The tattoo, dark and foreboding, hinted at deep-rooted secrets and long-buried ties that threatened to unravel everything she believed about her past. In that electrifying instant, Sam made a silent vow. This was not merely another night on the road, it was the precipice of a journey into danger, deceit, and destiny. With the desert wind urging her onward and the shadow of an unseen enemy looming, she resolved to uncover the truth at any cost. That fateful encounter, marked by a single haunting tattoo, was the spark that ignited a perilous quest, a quest that would force her to confront the brutal underworld of a Mexican cartel and reveal the astonishing truth about her own identity. The first light of dawn crept over the rugged landscape of the Southwest, revealing a tapestry of sun-baked roads and wind-sculpted rock formations. Samantha Sam Rivera parked her motorcycle on the edge of a dusty roadside diner, a relic of a bygone era that now served as her brief refuge. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the lingering aroma of motor oil, grounding her in a moment of calm before the storm that the night had promised. Sam had grown up on the fringes of society, always on the move, never tethered to one place for too long. Her reputation as a fearless biker had spread far and wide, earning her both admiration and enmity. Yet beneath the tough exterior lay a mind restless for answers, a hunger to understand the roots of her own mysterious past. That unsettling encounter with masked men and the haunting tattoo had ignited questions she could no longer ignore. Inside the diner, the clatter of plates and low hum of conversation created an ambience of gritty normalcy. Sam slid into a booth and ordered coffee, her eyes scanning the room. It wasn't long before she encountered Marco, a rugged yet thoughtful private investigator with a penchant for uncovering hidden truths. Marco had a weathered face that spoke of long nights spent chasing shadows, and his deep-set eyes betrayed both the pain and determination of someone who'd seen too much. He had been following whispers of cartel activities that had recently stirred the underworld, and fate had led him here. "Sam, I heard about your run-in last night," Marco said in a low tone, sliding into the seat across from her. His voice was calm but urgent, as if the weight of what he knew pressed heavily upon him. "That tattoo you mentioned, it's not random. It's tied to the cartel that's been expanding its reach in these parts." As Marco spoke, Sam's mind raced back to that night on the highway. The image of the tattoo, stark and ominous, was etched in her memory. "I need to know why they're after me," she replied, her voice steady but laced with a tremor of underlying fear. "Something about that mark. It feels like it's connected to who I am, even though I've always believed I was just another drifter." Before Marco could delve deeper, the diner's door swung open and in walked Luca, a former cartel member whose eyes had seen the worst of humanity. Luca's presence was a stark contrast to the mundane setting of the diner. His features, hardened by years of regret and survival, spoke volumes about the dangerous world he had left behind. He hesitated for a moment before taking the seat next to Sam, his voice husky and laden with sorrow. "I once believed in the cartel's cause," Luca confessed, his gaze fixed on the swirling patterns in his coffee. But I've since learned that loyalty in that world comes with a price. The cartel's operations aren't just about power, they're about secrets, family ties and betrayals that run deeper than anyone can imagine. Between sips of coffee and shared glances, a picture began to form, a mosaic of lies, half-truths, and untold histories. Marco revealed fragments of intelligence he had gathered, whispers of a secret child, hidden away by the cartel's enigmatic leader, Alejandro El Lobo Rivera. Luca, with a haunted expression, confirmed that the cartel's internal dynamics were more complex than the public facade. Sometimes, Luca said quietly, the enemies you fear the most come from the places you least expect. As the morning unfolded, the trio pored over scattered documents, faded photographs, and hastily scribbled notes. The diner's warm, cramped atmosphere became their temporary headquarters. Outside, the town slowly awoke, its denizens oblivious to the brewing storm of revelations inside. For Sam, each new piece of evidence felt like a step closer to the truth about her own identity, a truth that had been concealed from her for as long as she could remember. The conversation drifted to Sam's early memories, fleeting images of a woman's gentle smile, of whispered promises in the dark, and of a life that seemed both foreign and intimately her own. With every detail shared, the realization grew stronger. Sam wasn't just an ordinary biker with a penchant for freedom. She was entangled in a legacy of power and peril, one that bound her fate to a man she had never met. Marco leaned forward, his voice earnest. This isn't just about survival on the road, Sam. It's about reclaiming what was taken from you. A heritage that, once uncovered, could redefine everything you thought you knew about yourself. His words resonated deeply, sparking a determination in her that had been dormant until now. The initial challenges were mounting. The cartel's reach extended far and wide, and those who sought to unravel its secrets did so at great personal risk. But the risks, Sam now realized, were a necessary part of her journey toward discovering the hidden truths of her past. With Marco's investigative expertise and Luca's intimate knowledge of the cartel's inner workings, she felt a spark of hope, a fragile but growing certainty that the answers she sought lay just beyond the horizon. As the trio wrapped up their impromptu meeting, the weight of destiny pressed upon Sam. The dusty roads outside beckoned her onward, carrying her toward a confrontation with a past that was as enigmatic as it was dangerous. In that moment, she understood that her path was no longer one of aimless wandering. It was a quest for identity, justice, and ultimately, redemption. As the sun climbed higher over the sprawling desert, the trio found themselves entangled in a web of growing complexities. The revelations from the diner had left Sam reeling. Her life was no longer defined solely by the roar of her motorcycle or the thrill of the open road. Instead, every whispered secret pointed toward a legacy she had never consciously chosen, yet could no longer escape. Later that afternoon, Sam, Marco, and Luca convened in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a makeshift safe house that Luca had secured from his past. The building's peeling walls and shattered windows bore silent witness to many forgotten stories, much like the ones they were now unearthing. Amid the dust motes dancing in shafts of sunlight, tension mixed with determination, as the group pored over new documents and cryptic messages uncovered from the cartel's hidden files. Marco spread out a series of photographs on a rickety wooden table. These images were taken months ago, he explained, pointing at a grainy snapshot of a secluded compound nestled deep in the desert. It's the headquarters of Alejandro El Lobo Rivera. And in one of these pictures, look here, his finger traced a barely visible outline, a figure standing at the compound's edge. That's you, Sam, in a family photo that you were never meant to see. The room fell silent as Sam absorbed Marco's words. The shock of it all was overwhelming. Every fragment of memory she had painstakingly collected now resonated with a deeper, more personal meaning. Her childhood, filled with fleeting images and unexplained emotions, began to align with a reality that was both disturbing and undeniable. I never knew, she whispered, voice trembling with both sorrow and a newfound resolve. I never knew who I truly was. Luca, usually reserved and guarded, shared a story from his darker days with the cartel. There was a time when Alejandro believed that a child was a symbol of power, a living reminder of his legacy. The secret was kept hidden, even from you, Sam. They thought that by burying the truth, they could control your destiny. His eyes glistened with remorse as he recounted the lengths to which the cartel went to conceal the truth. But every secret has a way of clawing its way to the surface. As the weight of her newfound identity pressed upon her, Sam's emotions churned: anger, confusion, and a fierce determination to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The abandoned warehouse, with its echoes of past secrets and betrayals, seemed to mirror her internal struggle. In the days that followed, Sam found herself oscillating between bouts of reflective solitude and heated confrontations with the painful legacy that had shaped her existence. One evening, while riding through the barren outskirts of a once thriving mining town, Sam encountered a weathered old man leaning on a rusted fence. His eyes, sharp and knowing, locked with hers for a moment that stretched into eternity. "You've got the blood of a warrior," he rasped, his voice carrying the weight of untold years. "But remember, every warrior must face the ghosts of their past before they can truly forge their future." That cryptic encounter, though brief, rekindled a spark within Sam, a spark that urged her to confront the past rather than hide from it. Back at the warehouse, discussions grew increasingly urgent. Marco uncovered evidence that the cartel was planning a major power shift, one that would not only threaten Sam, but also destabilize the precarious balance within the criminal underworld. The documents hinted at internal strife, suggesting that factions within the cartel were eager to exploit the chaos for their own gain. "The deeper we dig, the more dangerous it becomes," Marco cautioned. "Your discovery isn't just about personal history, it's the key to a much larger game." During one intense late-night session, the trio reviewed intercepted communications that revealed a planned meeting between high-ranking cartel members. The tension was palpable as they realized that the gathering could be the moment when the full truth of Sam's identity would be put to the test, a moment that could either vindicate her or condemn her to a life of violence and uncertainty. As emotions ran high, Sam's inner voice grew louder. The blend of fear and courage spurred her to confront the duality of her existence. She was not merely a victim of circumstance. She was a central figure in a larger narrative of power, betrayal, and redemption. "I refuse to be defined by secrets and lies," she declared during one of their impassioned discussions. "I'm going to face this head-on. I need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be." Marco and Luca exchanged glances. Both understood that Sam's decision marked a pivotal turning point. The confrontation with Alejandro and the unraveling of the cartel's intricate web of deceit were imminent. The stakes had never been higher, and every step forward promised to reveal not only the dark underbelly of a criminal empire, but also the raw, unfiltered essence of who Sam truly was. With the desert wind as their constant companion, the trio steeled themselves for the next phase of their journey. The secrets that had long been buried were ready to resurface, and with them came the hope of liberation and the threat of inevitable retribution. Late one humid night, as the trio gathered once again in their safe house, an unexpected visitor arrived. The creak of the old warehouse door echoed in the silence as a figure in a worn leather jacket stepped inside. His face, partially hidden in the shadows, carried an air of mystery and deep regret. Without preamble, he introduced himself as Eduardo, an estranged relative of Alejandro El Lobo Rivera. "Eduardo," Marco said cautiously, eyeing the newcomer. "We weren't expecting anyone else. What do you know about the cartel and about Sam's past?" Eduardo's gaze fell on Sam, and in that instant, something in his expression shifted from sorrow to urgency. "I've been waiting for you," he murmured, stepping closer. "There are truths that have been buried for too long, truths that only you can unravel." The room grew tense as Eduardo settled at the table, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he pulled out an old, faded envelope. Inside, wrapped in yellowed paper, were documents, personal letters, and even a small photograph of a smiling woman cradling a baby that bore a striking resemblance to Sam. The photograph was dated decades ago, yet the image felt as if it belonged to another life entirely. Eduardo began, his voice low and measured. "Your mother wasn't who you believed she was. She was once part of our family, a family intricately woven into the very fabric of the cartel's legacy. Alejandro's ambition was far greater than you ever imagined, and your birth was no accident." He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. "You were born into this world of power, betrayal, and dark loyalties. The cartel wasn't just a criminal organization, it was a family enterprise, and you are its rightful heir." Sam's mind raced as Eduardo continued. I know this is hard to hear, but your mother was forced into secrecy. The cartel's operations required a facade of legitimacy, and having a child out in the open would have jeopardized everything. They kept you hidden, far from Alejandro's reach, until the day you were meant to be introduced to the legacy. Marco's eyes widened as he absorbed the revelation. So, what you're saying is that all the mysteries surrounding your identity, they were orchestrated from the very beginning? Eduardo nodded slowly. Yes, the cartel needed a symbol, a living testament to their power and continuity. Alejandro believed that one day, when the time was right, you would come forward. Until then, the secret of your birth was protected at all costs. His voice wavered, a mixture of regret and defiance lacing every word. I was one of those entrusted with this secret, but I eventually couldn't bear the guilt and the burden. I left, determined to find a way to make amends. The shock of Eduardo's confession struck Sam like a physical blow. The carefully constructed pieces of her identity, the whispered legends, the half-remembered images, the inexplicable pull toward a destiny she had never chosen, began to interlock with this newfound revelation. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the photograph, the bittersweet memory of a mother she never truly knew, mingling with the pain of betrayal. I need to understand everything, Sam whispered, her voice raw with emotion. Why did they hide me? What did my mother sacrifice? And what does this mean for me now? Eduardo leaned in, his tone firm yet compassionate. Your mother was forced to make an impossible choice, to protect you from a world that could destroy you if you knew too much. But now, with the cartel on the brink of a major power shift, and factions within the organization vying for control, your existence is more critical than ever. You're not just a lost child, you're the key to restoring balance or to plunging the empire into chaos. As the weight of his words sank in, Luca interjected, his voice grim. This explains so many things, the hesitancy in Alejandro's actions, the way some cartel members seem almost reluctant to harm you. They see you as more than just a pawn, Marco added. It also means that your destiny isn't entirely your own. You're caught in a battle between old loyalties and new ambitions, a struggle that could determine the future of the cartel and, by extension, the underworld of this entire region. The room fell silent as everyone grappled with the enormity of the revelation. Sam's inner turmoil churned wildly. The love and abandonment she had felt throughout her life were now intermingled with a sense of predestined responsibility. The idea that her entire existence had been orchestrated by forces beyond her control was both horrifying and strangely liberating. For the first time, she saw a clear path emerging from the labyrinth of secrets, a path that led directly to her true legacy. In that charged moment, a decision crystallized in her mind. I won't let them use me as a weapon or a symbol against my will, she declared, her voice steady despite the tremors of fear. I need to decide who I am, on my own terms. I will find the truth about my mother, and I will confront Alejandro, not as a victim, but as someone who holds the power to reshape this destiny. Eduardo's eyes softened as he nodded. Then you must prepare yourself. The closer you get to the truth, the more dangerous things will become. The cartel is not a forgiving world, and Alejandro will stop at nothing to reclaim what he believes is his. With that, the room became a crucible of determination and resolve. The twist of fate had unveiled a hidden heritage, and now every secret, every betrayal, and every whispered promise carried a new meaning. The future was uncertain, and the stakes had never been higher. But one thing was clear. Sam's journey was now irrevocably intertwined with the dark legacy of the cartel, and the battle for her identity had only just begun. In the wake of Eduardo's earth-shattering revelation, the safe house transformed into a crucible of conflicting emotions and whispered reckonings. The room, dimly lit by a flickering overhead light, bore witness to the raw vulnerability of each individual as they processed the implications of Sam's hidden legacy. Sam sat silently at the table, her hands trembling as she traced the outline of the photograph Eduardo had shown her. The image of her mother, a gentle smile captured in a long-forgotten moment, served as both a balm and a bitter reminder of everything that had been taken from her. Her eyes, glistening with unshed tears, moved slowly across the faded paper as memories, long suppressed, began to surface. The shock of betrayal mingled with an unexpected surge of empowerment. She was no longer just the lone biker fighting against the odds. She was a pivotal figure in a sprawling saga, tethered to a legacy that both haunted and defined her. Marco, who had always been the pragmatic force of the trio, leaned back in his creaking chair, His usual confident gaze was now tempered by a solemn concern. "Sam, this changes everything," he said quietly, his tone reflective. "We're not just dealing with a hidden past anymore. We're talking about a destiny that has been manipulated by those who want to control you, and by extension, the entire cartel." His words cut through the silence, resonating with a gravity that underscored the peril ahead. Luca, ever the reluctant insider of the cartel's darker dealings, shifted uncomfortably. His face, lined with the scars of past choices, betrayed the inner turmoil that Eduardo's words had stirred within him. "I've seen many lives crushed under the weight of secrets like these," he admitted, his voice rough and laced with regret. "The moment you start questioning your fate, the forces around you start to crumble, but they're not going to let you go without a fight. Alejandro's grip on this empire is ironclad, and now he knows that you're his daughter, a threat he can't ignore." Luca's words were both a warning and a call to arms, a reminder of the deadly stakes involved. For hours, the trio sat in a pensive silence, each lost in their own labyrinth of thoughts. The revelations had upended the delicate balance of their plans, forcing them to reconsider every strategy and alliance. Sam's internal conflict was palpable. She felt the sting of abandonment and betrayal, but also a stirring resolve to reclaim her narrative. "I always thought I was free," she murmured, almost to herself. "But freedom means facing the past head-on, however painful it may be." Her declaration, though soft, carried the weight of a woman who was beginning to understand the true meaning of strength. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes of the safe house, as if echoing the chaos within. Marco began to pace, his mind racing through the ramifications of their next steps. "We need to reassess our resources," he said, breaking the silence. "Now that we know who you really are, the cartel's plans may accelerate. We must be prepared for any move Alejandro makes." His analytical mind was already piecing together a new strategy, one that accounted for both the newfound threat and the potential leverage Sam's identity might offer. Luca's eyes flickered with a mix of caution and determination. "I've been on the inside for too long to believe that any secret remains hidden forever," he said grimly. "Alejandro will be furious, not just because he's lost control, but because this revelation exposes the cracks in his empire. There will be purges, betrayals, and more bloodshed, and you, whether you like it or not, are the catalyst for it all." His words, heavy with the burden of his own past, resonated with the unspoken truth that the journey ahead would be fraught with peril. In that charged atmosphere, Sam felt a transformation taking place. No longer could she hide behind the persona of a solitary biker, free and untethered. The echoes of her past, painful yet undeniable, became the forge in which her resolve was tempered. "I need to understand every part of this," she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I must find out who my mother was, what sacrifices were made, and most importantly, what role I am meant to play in all of this." Her eyes, once filled with uncertainty, now shone with a fire that hinted at both defiance and determination. As the night wore on, the trio mapped out tentative plans. Marco suggested gathering further intel on Alejandro's current operations and any movements within the cartel's inner circle. Luca, with his insider knowledge, proposed discreet meetings with contacts who might shed light on the shifting alliances within the organization. Meanwhile, Sam contemplated the emotional cost of unearthing more secrets and the inevitable confrontation with her father, Alejandro El Lobo Rivera. The safe house became a sanctuary of resolve, where painful truths and strategic planning intertwined. Each of them understood that their path was now irrevocably linked to a destiny that had been manipulated by those in power. Yet, within that shared understanding lay the seed of rebellion, a determination to reclaim autonomy and to redefine what it meant to belong to a legacy marred by deception and cruelty. As dawn approached and the first hints of light crept through the cracked windows, the trio knew that the coming days would test their resolve like never before. The revelations of the night had set the stage for an impending storm, a storm in which the personal and the political would collide. With hearts steeled and minds sharpened, they prepared to face the chaos ahead, united by the belief that, in confronting the darkest parts of the past, they might finally carve out a future on their own terms. In the days that followed the harrowing revelations, the fragile alliance among Sam, Marco, and Luca began to face its own internal strains. The weight of Sam's newfound identity and the imminent threat of Alejandro's wrath had forced them to confront not only the external dangers of the cartel, but also the unpredictable intricacies within their own ranks. As they plotted their next move, a series of unexpected subplots emerged, each adding layers of complexity to an already volatile situation. One early morning, as the trio met in a small nondescript safe house on the outskirts of the city, a coded message arrived on Marco's secure phone. The message, terse and laced with urgency, hinted at a secret meeting among cartel dissidents, individuals who were not only disillusioned with Alejandro's tyrannical reign, but who might also possess crucial information about his next moves. Marco's eyes lit up with a mix of curiosity and apprehension as he shared the message with Sam and Luca. "This isn't just another lead," Marco said, his tone measured yet intense. "It's a chance to tap into a network that could help us undermine Alejandro's power from within. But it's risky. The dissidents are as unpredictable as they are desperate." Before the trio could deliberate further, a familiar yet unexpected figure appeared at their door, a former friend of Sam's from her early days on the road, named Jess. Jess had once been a fellow biker, a kindred spirit who shared Sam's love for freedom and rebellion. However, over the years, Jess had carved out a niche as an underground information broker, navigating the shadowy corridors of the criminal underworld with uncanny finesse. "Sam, I heard you've been digging into some dangerous secrets," Jess said, her voice a mixture of concern and determination. "Word travels fast in these circles, and I've got a few contacts who might be able to help. But you need to understand, these aren't just petty criminals. They're well connected, and any wrong move could put you all in jeopardy." Jess's arrival introduced a new subplot, an exploration of loyalty, trust, and the blurred lines between friend and foe. Sam, still reeling from her personal revelations, now had to grapple with the possibility that her past might hold allies who could either bolster her cause or betray her at a critical moment. At the same time, Luca uncovered disturbing evidence from within the cartel's financial records. Hidden transactions and coded references in the ledgers pointed toward a covert operation involving arms deals and political bribery, an operation that not only funded Alejandro's regime, but also implicated influential figures in local law enforcement. Luca's discovery meant that the stakes were higher than a mere familial feud. There was a larger network of corruption at play, one that threatened to engulf the entire region in chaos. "This isn't just about you or even the cartel alone," Luca confided to Marco in a hushed tone during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "If we expose these operations, we're going to blow the lid off a system that goes far beyond Alejandro's control. But it also means that powerful enemies, both inside and outside the criminal world, will be watching our every move." The safe house, once a quiet refuge, became a bustling hub of conflicting agendas. Jess began reaching out to her network of contacts, setting up clandestine meetings in darkened alleys and abandoned warehouses. Each meeting yielded a mix of promising leads and troubling warnings. Whispers of a mysterious figure, known only as the Broker, whose allegiances were as mercurial as the desert winds. Rumor had it that the Broker was negotiating a deal with rival factions within the cartel, and that his intervention could tip the balance of power in unpredictable ways. During one such meeting in a deserted parking lot on the outskirts of the city, Sam found herself face to face with a nervous intermediary. "The Broker doesn't work for anyone," the intermediary murmured, eyes darting around for potential eavesdroppers. "He plays both sides, selling secrets to the highest bidder, and he's very interested in you, not just as Alejandro's daughter, but as the symbol of change he believes can shake the foundations of this entire empire." As the web of intrigue grew ever more tangled, Sam's internal struggle deepened. The realization that her very existence had become a pawn in a much larger game weighed heavily on her. Every new piece of information, every covert meeting, only served to blur the lines between ally and adversary. Trust, once a cornerstone of her relationship with Marco and Luca, now became a luxury she could ill afford. In a particularly tense confrontation one evening, Marco and Luca debated the risks of involving external contacts. "Every step we take with these dissidents and brokers pulls us further into a labyrinth," Marco warned. "We need to be absolutely certain that we're not walking into a trap that could destroy us all." Luca, his gaze hard and unyielding, countered, "Sometimes, the only way out of a labyrinth is to get lost in it. We must take calculated risks if we're ever going to dismantle Alejandro's empire." Caught between the conflicting urgencies of her allies and the potential for betrayal from unexpected quarters, Sam felt the pressure mounting. The prospect of confronting not only the monstrous legacy of the cartel, but also the inherent treachery within the criminal underworld, left her with a lingering sense of isolation. Yet, amidst the chaos, a steely resolve began to crystallize within her. She knew that to reclaim her life and to honor the sacrifices of her mother, she had to navigate these treacherous waters, no matter the personal cost. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city, Sam resolved to move forward with renewed determination. The converging subplots, with all their promise and peril, had set the stage for the next phase of her journey, a phase where every decision could mean the difference between liberation and total annihilation. The tension in the safe house reached a fever pitch as alliances were tested and buried secrets came bubbling to the surface. One chilly evening, with the sound of rain tapping against broken windows, Sam, Marco, Luca, and even Jess gathered once more around a scarred wooden table. The room, lit only by a single dangling bulb, was filled with the weight of unspoken truths and the raw vulnerability of each soul present. Sam stared at the scattered documents and photos on the table, her eyes tracing over the image of her mother once more. "I can't shake this feeling," she murmured, voice barely above a whisper. "Every new piece of the puzzle pulls me in two directions: the need to know who I am and the fear of what I might find." Her words carried the unmistakable tremor of conflicted emotions, a longing for clarity while grappling with the pain of loss and betrayal. Marco leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "It's natural to feel torn, Sam. You're not just fighting an external enemy, you're battling the ghosts of your past and the expectations that come with this legacy. We all have our demons. The question is, do we let them control us, or do we use them to forge something stronger?" His voice was gentle yet resolute, as if daring her to embrace the turmoil as a catalyst for transformation. Jess, who had always been the pragmatic wildcard of the group, interjected with a cautious smile. "Sometimes, our scars are not just reminders of pain, they're badges of survival. I've seen people like you rise above everything, Sam, but it won't be easy. Trust will be our biggest challenge." Her eyes flicked to Luca, who remained silent, his expression dark and pensive. Luca's face, etched with regret and determination, finally broke his silence. "I've spent years inside that world, feeling like a puppet dancing on strings," he confessed, his tone low and gravelly. "Every decision I made, every alliance I forged, was tainted by secrets and lies. And now with you in the mix, I worry that we're all destined to repeat the same mistakes. But maybe, just maybe, we can choose a different path." His admission hung in the air, heavy with the burden of past transgressions and the hope for redemption. As the discussion deepened, a complex interplay of emotions began to surface. Sam's eyes shone with unshed tears as she recalled fleeting moments of warmth from a childhood she barely remembered. Snippets of laughter, gentle voices calling her "sweet girl" in a language she didn't fully understand. "I sometimes wonder," she confided, "if part of this pain is because I've been robbed of a normal life. How do I reconcile the child I never knew with the warrior I'm expected to become?" Marco reached out, placing a steady hand on hers. "You are both, Sam. You're not defined solely by the legacy that was forced upon you, or the violence that surrounds it. You have the power to shape your own destiny." His words were a quiet promise that the scars of the past did not have to dictate the future. Outside, the storm raged on, its fury mirroring the inner chaos of the safe house. The sound of thunder punctuated moments of silence, as if nature itself was voicing the turmoil within. Jess's phone buzzed with another cryptic message, an update on the broker's movements. She glanced at the screen, her face hardening. "It seems our enigmatic contact is about to make a move. We might have to decide whether to follow his lead or cut ties entirely." Her statement was laced with both anticipation and apprehension. In that charged moment, Luca looked up sharply, his eyes narrowing as he addressed the group. "Every time we engage with these shadowy figures, we risk being pulled deeper into the mire of corruption. I've seen too many lives destroyed by misplaced trust. Yet if we don't act, Alejandro's grip will only tighten." His words struck a chord with Sam, intensifying the emotional battleground where hope and despair collided. The group fell silent as each person wrestled with the implications of their choices. For Sam, the stakes were more personal than ever. "I can't let fear paralyze me," she finally declared, voice resolute despite the quiver of uncertainty. "I need to confront this legacy head-on, even if it means facing parts of myself that I'm not sure I recognize. Her declaration was a pledge to herself, a promise to rise above the pain and claim her true identity, no matter the cost. Marco nodded, his gaze steady. This isn't just about revenge or survival anymore. It's about finding the balance between who you were meant to be and who you choose to become. His words echoed in the room, offering both comfort and a call to action. As the night wore on, the safe house transformed from a place of whispered fears to a crucible of determination and shared resolve. The emotional dilemmas that had once seemed insurmountable began to crystallize into a collective purpose. Each individual, bound by their own past mistakes and hopes for the future, realized that the path forward required not just strategic planning, but also a willingness to face the deepest parts of themselves. In that moment, as the storm outside began to abate, a fragile yet potent unity emerged. They knew that the coming days would test not only their cunning against the cartel's machinations, but also their ability to trust one another with the most intimate parts of their souls. And as Sam stared into the reflective glow of a rain-soaked window, she resolved that, come what may, she would step into the storm, embracing the tumult within as the forge of her rebirth. The tension outside the safe house was palpable as dusk settled over the desert city, shrouding its streets in deepening shadows. For days, the atmosphere had been electric with whispers of betrayal and secret meetings, but now an undercurrent of imminent danger began to seep into every conversation. The fragile alliance that Sam and her companions had forged was about to be tested in ways none of them could have foreseen. Late that evening, a coded message arrived on Marco's encrypted device, a brief, cryptic string of words that hinted at a high-stakes maneuver by one of the cartel's most ruthless lieutenants. The message read, "The wolf stirs at midnight. The air must choose her pack." Its ominous tone sent chills down Marco's spine. This wasn't just another hint at shifting alliances. It was a direct challenge, a call to action that could force Sam's hand sooner than expected. Marco's eyes met Sam's across the dimly lit room. "This isn't idle chatter," he murmured. "It's a warning that Alejandro's forces are mobilizing, and someone inside his circle is making a power play. If we're not careful, we might be walking into a trap that could end all of this." Before anyone could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps and hushed voices from outside the safe house shattered the uneasy calm. Jess had returned from one of her clandestine meetings with contacts in the cartel's dissident network. Her face was drawn, eyes flickering with urgency. "I just got word from one of my most reliable sources," she said, her voice tight with tension. "There's been a shift in the cartel's hierarchy. A faction is breaking away, and they're armed with insider intel. They're looking to topple Alejandro from within, and they're ready to make a move at midnight." Luca's expression hardened as he absorbed the news. "This could be our chance or our undoing," he warned. "If these renegades succeed, the ensuing chaos might tear the cartel apart. But if Alejandro consolidates power before we can act, he'll wipe out every loose end, including you, Sam." The revelation sparked a flurry of debate among the group. Sam, who had felt the weight of her destiny growing heavier with every passing day, now faced an even graver decision. She realized that her next move could either tip the balance toward freedom or plunge her into the heart of a violent power struggle. In a hushed, determined tone, Sam addressed the group. "I'm no longer a bystander in this war. I have to choose my side, and fast. But I won't let myself be manipulated by anyone's agenda, whether it's Alejandro's or the renegades. I need to understand who these factions really are and what they're willing to sacrifice." Marco interjected. "That means we need to gather more intel. Fast. We can't afford to make any rash decisions when lives, including yours, are on the line." Over the next several hours, the group huddled together, piecing together fragments of intelligence from Jess's contacts, intercepted cartel communications, and even some dubious whispers from the criminal underworld. The information painted a picture of a deeply fractured organization. One faction, led by a shadowy figure known only as El Silencio, sought to overthrow Alejandro and establish a new order based on transparency and reform. In contrast, another group fiercely loyal to Alejandro was mobilizing to crush any dissent with ruthless efficiency. Amid this mounting chaos, Sam found herself haunted by vivid dreams, a recurring vision of a lone wolf howling at a blood-red moon, a symbol that resonated with the message in the coded text. In these dreams, she was both the prey and the predator, torn between the legacy of her bloodline and the call to forge her own destiny. The dreams left her with an unsettling certainty. The choices she made in the coming hours would define not just her fate, but the future of the entire underworld. As midnight approached, the safe house transformed into a war room. The sound of distant sirens, mixed with the eerie silence of anticipation, underscored the gravity of the situation. Marco was busy scanning through the latest updates on his device, while Luca paced back and forth, his mind clearly wrestling with old demons. Jess, ever the pragmatist, made calls and arranged secret meetings with several key figures among the cartel dissidents. "Sam," Marco said quietly, breaking her reverie, "there's something else. One of my contacts claims that Alejandro might already be aware of your existence, and he's not pleased. Rumor has it that he's dispatched a personal enforcer to track you down before the midnight meeting. If that's true, then the danger isn't just from the factions within the cartel. It's also coming from your own father." The revelation sent a surge of adrenaline through Sam's veins. It was one thing to be caught in a power struggle between warring factions, but being directly targeted by Alejandro made the stakes unimaginably personal. She knew that her next steps had to be both swift and calculated. Her inner resolve hardened, fueled by the realization that the war for her identity was about to erupt on multiple fronts. "I need to confront this head-on," Sam declared, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I'll reach out to the dissidents, but I need a secure plan to protect us and to uncover exactly what Alejandro intends to do." Her determination was evident, her decision clear. She was no longer a passive player, but the driving force of her own destiny. As the clock neared midnight, the desert winds seemed to carry whispers of impending conflict, each gust stirring the dry dust like the prelude to a storm. The pieces were now in motion, and the coming hours promised a collision of loyalties, secrets, and betrayals. With the knowledge that both friend and foe could wear many faces, Sam and her allies steeled themselves for the storm that was about to break, a storm that would force them to choose sides, risk everything, and confront the darkness that had long festered within the cartel. As dawn broke over the horizon, the fragile alliances forged in the dead of night began to take on new dimensions. The safe house, once a silent sanctuary, had transformed into a bustling nerve center where information and strategy intertwined. In the soft light of early morning, Sam had Marco, Luca, and Jess gathered around a scarred table, each bearing the marks of sleepless nights and the weight of secrets yet to be fully unraveled. Jess, who had long operated on the margins of trust, took the lead in a debriefing session with a small group of cartel dissidents. Her contacts had confirmed that El Silencio was planning a covert meeting with several mid-level commanders, a meeting that could redefine the power structure within the cartel. "These renegades aren't just rebels," she explained, her voice low and determined. "They're fighters who have grown tired of Alejandro's cruelty. They believe that change is possible, but they need someone who can unite them." All eyes turned to Sam, whose lineage made her the unlikely symbol of that very change. Marco, ever the tactician, pored over intercepted communications on his tablet. "There's a pattern here," he noted, pointing to a series of timestamps and coded references. "It appears that some of the dissidents are in contact with individuals from law enforcement and even rival gangs. They're not working in isolation. There's a broader coalition forming that could destabilize not just the cartel, but the entire underworld network." His analytical tone masked an undercurrent of excitement. This could be the leverage they needed. Luca, still haunted by his past, but now more determined than ever to forge a better future, added, "I've been re-establishing old connections, people I once trusted, and they're willing to testify to the corruption that runs deep in this organization. We have potential allies within unexpected circles, from minor officials to disgruntled ex-cartel members." His statement bridged the gap between the personal and the political, reminding everyone that the war they were fighting extended far beyond family ties. Amid the strategic discussions, personal connections began to emerge with surprising clarity. Sam Mamura, once isolated by her nomadic lifestyle, now found solace in the shared vulnerability among her companions. In one quiet moment, she confided in Marco about a recurring dream, a dream of a long, winding road leading to a hidden valley where her mother once whispered promises of protection and hope. "I used to think I was running away from something," she admitted softly, "but perhaps I was always running toward something, toward the truth of who I'm meant to be." Marco listened intently, his eyes reflecting both empathy and the spark of a deeper understanding that transcended the boundaries of their mission. Jess, with her characteristic blend of streetwise cynicism and loyalty, revealed a personal stake in the conflict. "I lost someone to this mess," she said, her voice wavering for just a moment. "Back when I was younger, I believed in the freedom of the open road, but now I see that freedom comes with a price, and sometimes that price is paid in blood." Her words, laden with both regret and determination, resonated with Luca, who nodded in silent acknowledgement. Their shared histories, though different in detail, were intertwined by a common desire to prevent further loss. The atmosphere in the safe house shifted as the group began to realize that every connection, every contact, every whispered conversation in the dead of night was a piece of a larger puzzle. The dissidents' network, the potential allies among law enforcement, even the hidden loyalties within the cartel itself, all these threads were converging toward a point of no return. "We're standing at a crossroads," Marco remarked, breaking the silence as he scanned through the latest data. "Our next move isn't just about survival, it's about choosing which future we want to build. Do we help these rebels seize control and dismantle Alejandro's empire? Or do we play it safe and let him tighten his grip?" Sam's response was measured but resolute. "I refuse to be a pawn in someone else's game," she declared. "I have a right to decide my own fate, and if that means taking on a legacy built on lies and brutality, then so be it." Her declaration stirred a palpable sense of unity among the group. In that moment, the disparate subplots converged into a single, coherent mission: to use every connection, every alliance, to reclaim not only Sam's identity, but also the future of the underworld that had long been under Alejandro's oppressive shadow. Outside the safe house, the city began to stir with an energy that mirrored the group's own resolve. Unbeknownst to them, key players within the cartel were already mobilizing, and rival factions were quietly positioning themselves for the battles ahead. The safe house, with its eclectic mix of rebels, former insiders, and those desperate enough to risk everything for a chance at redemption, was now a microcosm of the larger revolution that was on the horizon. As the morning wore on, and the first rays of sunlight bathed the room in a hopeful glow, the bonds among Sam, Marco, Luca, and Jess solidified. They were no longer just a collection of individuals brought together by circumstance. They had become a family bound by a shared purpose. Each connection, whether forged in trust or tempered by betrayal, was a stepping stone toward dismantling an empire built on fear. In that charged moment, as plans were laid out and roles assigned, it was clear that the stakes were higher than ever. The convergence of subplots and the strengthening of personal connections signaled that their battle was entering a new phase, one where the lines between friend and foe would blur, and where every decision could either fortify their alliance or shatter it beyond repair. Tensions that had been simmering for weeks finally erupted into open conflict as the fragile alliances began to fracture under the weight of impending danger. The safe house, once a beacon of covert hope, was now a pressure cooker of mistrust and anticipation. Outside, the city was gripped by a palpable unease as rival factions within the cartel made their final moves to secure power. It all came to a head on a stormy night, when an encrypted alert from one of Jess's most trusted contacts confirmed that a high-stakes meeting was scheduled in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of town. The message was unambiguous. If the dissident faction led by El Silencio did not seize this opportunity, Alejandro's loyalists would tighten their stranglehold, and with them, the threat against Sam would intensify. Inside the safe house, every conversation was laden with urgency. Marco's face, usually a mask of calm calculation, was etched with worry. "This meeting isn't just another negotiation," he warned. "It's the tipping point. One wrong move, and the entire underworld could be set ablaze." His words echoed through the room as Luca pored over the latest intelligence reports, tracing every connection and double cross. Even Jess, normally so self-assured, seemed to wrestle with a shadow of doubt. Sam sat silently at the center of it all, the weight of her dual legacy, both as Alejandro's daughter and as a beacon of change, pressing down on her. The recent revelations had shattered her world into fragments of betrayal, love, and fierce determination. In the quiet moments before the storm of action, she recalled a recurring dream, a lone wolf surrounded by darkness, howling at a crimson sky, a symbol that had haunted her nights and now mirrored the chaos unfolding around her. That very night, as the rain battered the rooftops and the wind howled through desolate alleys, the group mobilized. They split into two teams. One, led by Jess and Luca, would covertly scout the industrial complex, while the other, with Marco and Sam at the forefront, prepared to attend the meeting under the guise of cartel intermediaries. The stakes were sky-high, and every second could mean the difference between tipping the scales in their favor or plunging into irrevocable disaster. As Sam and Marco drove through the stormy streets in a nondescript van, the radio crackled with urgent updates. "Movement detected near the north entrance," a distorted voice announced. The news sent a jolt through Sam. She gripped the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles whitening as adrenaline surged. The industrial complex loomed ahead, its silhouette a dark monolith against the flickering city lights. It was here that the true test awaited. Upon arrival, Marco and Sam observed from a discreet vantage point. Shadows flitted across the vast, crumbling structure, and voices, tense, low, and laced with both hope and menace, echoed in the night. They could see several figures gathering, their body language betraying both caution and ambition. It was clear that the dissidents had not come alone. Alejandro's loyalists were also present, their eyes scanning for any sign of weakness. A palpable electricity charged the air, as if the storm outside were merely a prelude to the internal tempest about to break out. Inside the complex, a heated debate unfolded. "We cannot wait any longer," a gruff voice demanded. It was one of the senior lieutenants from Alejandro's camp, his tone both authoritative and desperate. Across from him, a softer but equally determined voice from the dissidents countered, "If we act now, we can dismantle his network from within. But if we falter, we'll all be consumed by his wrath." The room crackled with tension as each faction vied for dominance. In that moment, Sam knew that her next move would not only determine her own fate, but also tip the balance between chaos and a chance at reformation. With the weight of her lineage and the hopes of her newfound allies pressing in on her, she stepped forward from the shadows. Her presence alone caused a stir. Whispers, gasps, and wary glances followed her every move. She was Alejandro's daughter, the living embodiment of a secret legacy, and now she had to decide, would she be a pawn in his ruthless game or a force for radical change? "Enough!" Sam's voice rang out clearly, cutting through the clamor like a knife. "I know who I am, and I refuse to be used as a tool for your ambitions." Her declaration silenced the room momentarily, drawing all eyes to her. "We stand at a crossroads tonight. We can either continue down this path of endless bloodshed, or we can choose a new way, a way where power isn't defined by fear, but by our will to change." Her words were met with a stunned silence. For a heartbeat, even the most hardened cartel members seemed to reconsider their loyalties. Marco's steady gaze from the sidelines and Luca's nod of approval emboldened her. Yet, the tension was far from diffused. In the dim light, a murmur spread among the loyalists, a signal that Alejandro's personal enforcer might be closing in, ready to enforce his father's ruthless decree. As the conflict reached its zenith, every faction braced for the impending explosion. The dissidents clutched their makeshift weapons with grim determination, while Alejandro's men tightened their formation, ready to strike at any perceived threat. Sam's declaration had ignited a spark of rebellion, but it also served as a rallying cry for the forces that preferred the old order. In that fraught, decisive moment, the room was charged with an energy that promised irreversible change. The night was poised on the brink of transformation, one where allegiances would be tested, sacrifices made, and the true nature of power revealed in the blood and resolve of those daring enough to challenge it. In the aftermath of the explosive meeting at the industrial complex, the fractured factions found themselves thrust into an unyielding confrontation that would shape the course of their destinies. The air was thick with tension, as conflicting loyalties clashed in the cold, unrelenting night. Within the vast, dilapidated space of the complex, every whispered plan, every cautious glance, and every clenched fist signaled that the coming moments would be decisive. Sam stood in the center of the chaos, her eyes fixed on the assembly before her. The atmosphere was charged, with the dissidents rallying against the entrenched loyalists of Alejandro's empire. The floor of the abandoned warehouse had become a battleground of words and wills, each faction determined to impose its vision for the future. At the heart of the storm, Sam's voice rang out steady and clear. "We are not defined by the bloodshed of our past, nor by the tyranny of fear. Tonight, we choose our own path." Her declarations sparked an uproar among the gathered men and women. Some cheered, emboldened by her resolve, while others scowled, clinging to the remnants of old loyalties. Amidst the clamor, Alejandro's personal enforcer, a towering figure clad in black with a steely glare, stepped forward. His presence was a stark reminder that the old guard was still very much in control and that defiance would come at a high price. "You dare challenge the order that has kept this empire intact?" the enforcer thundered, his voice booming across the cavernous hall. His tone left little room for negotiation as he advanced toward Sam. In that instant, the room split into factions, with eyes darting between Sam and the enforcer, uncertain of which side the tide would favor. Marco quickly intervened, his tone cool and commanding. "This isn't about preserving an empire built on terror," he declared, stepping between Sam and the enforcer. "It's about ensuring that every decision we make is our own. We are tired of playing by rules dictated by a man who sees us as expendable pawns." The enforcer's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and hesitation as he regarded Marco and then returned his gaze to Sam. "Your father's legacy is not something you can simply discard," he snarled. "It's written in blood and fear, and you will either embrace it or be crushed by it." At that moment, a split-second decision hung in the balance. Sam felt the weight of generations upon her shoulders, yet her heart pounded with the conviction of her own resolve. Stepping forward, she met the enforcer's gaze head-on. "I reject a legacy defined by cruelty and coercion," she proclaimed. "I will not allow my identity to be dictated by someone who rules through terror. I choose to create a future based on truth, justice, and freedom." The confrontation reached its boiling point. The enforcer's hand twitched toward the concealed weapon at his side, while members of both factions held their breath, waiting for the next move. It was in this charged silence that the true nature of the conflict emerged. It was not merely a battle for power, but a struggle for the very soul of the underworld, a decision that would determine whether the future was ruled by fear or by hope. A murmur of discontent spread through Alejandro's loyalists, their faces betraying a mix of uncertainty and defiance. Some began to question whether their allegiance to the old ways was worth the inevitable bloodshed. On the other side, the dissidents rallied behind Sam's words, their eyes burning with the possibility of a new beginning. The room became a microcosm of a broader revolution, with every individual forced to choose between the comfort of a familiar tyranny and the unpredictable promise of change. In a decisive moment that would alter the course of events, Luca emerged from the shadows. His presence, marked by the scars of his past, lent gravity to the unfolding drama. "Enough!" Luca's voice echoed across the space, silencing the cacophony. "We are at a crossroads. We can either continue down this path of endless violence, or we can choose to build something better from the ruins of what has been. Let us decide together, without the blood of our own making." His words, resonant with personal sacrifice and hard-won wisdom, prompted a hushed discussion among the factions. The enforcer, momentarily caught off guard by the unified call for a new order, hesitated. It was that pause, the sliver of vulnerability in the face of unyielding determination, that Sam seized upon. With unwavering resolve, she extended her hand toward the enforcer. "Join us, or step aside," she said quietly but firmly. "You have a choice as well. Do you wish to be part of a future where we all suffer under tyranny, or do you believe in the possibility of redemption?" For several agonizing seconds, the enforcer's eyes searched the room, taking in the faces of those who stood united against the oppressive past. Finally, with a heavy sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of conflict, he slowly lowered his weapon. I will not stand in your way," he admitted, his voice rough with a mixture of resignation and hope. "Perhaps it is time for change." A collective exhale swept through the crowd, and even those who had once been steadfast in their allegiance to Alejandro's regime began to nod, their expressions softening as the possibility of a new future took root. Marco and Luca exchanged a glance of relief, knowing that this shift in allegiance would mark a turning point in the war for control. Yet, amidst the newfound hope, a lingering uncertainty remained. The battle was far from over, and difficult choices still lay ahead. In that charged moment of reconciliation and decision, Sam realized that the true victory lay not in defeating an enemy, but in uniting those who had once been divided by fear and suspicion. As the factions began to merge, forging a tentative alliance in the face of their common oppressor, She knew that their next steps would be decisive. The legacy of the past was being challenged, and a new chapter in their turbulent saga was ready to be written, a chapter where every decision would carry the promise of change, and every confrontation would shape the destiny of a people longing for freedom. As dawn approached on the day of reckoning, the fragile truce forged in the aftermath of the confrontation at the industrial complex teetered on the edge of collapse. The atmosphere was electric with anticipation and dread. Every heartbeat, every whispered plan, and every silent glance spoke of a storm about to break. The newly united faction, a blend of cartel dissidents and former loyalists, had retreated to a fortified safe house on the outskirts of the city. Here, beneath the echo of past battles, the final arrangements for their decisive stand were being made. Inside the safe house, tension was palpable. The air vibrated with the unspoken understanding that this day would decide not only Sam's destiny, but the fate of the entire underworld. Sam, standing before a makeshift war room lined with maps, intercepted messages and strategic outlines, felt the heavy weight of expectation. Every decision made in that room carried the potential to reshape the future, a future that had long been dominated by fear and tyranny. Marco paced near the window, his eyes scanning the horizon as storm clouds gathered in the distance. "We're on the brink," he murmured, more to himself than to anyone else. His voice was a mixture of resolve and concern. The delicate alliance they had built was under immense strain, and the approaching conflict promised to test every bond, every plan, and every ounce of courage they possessed. Luca, leaning against a battered table, rifled through a collection of documents. "Alejandro's forces are mobilizing faster than we anticipated," he said, his tone grim. "Every minute counts now. We need to coordinate with our contacts on the outside and secure every possible advantage." His words were punctuated by the distant rumble of thunder, a natural echo of the turmoil that lay ahead. Jess, ever the pragmatic broker of hidden truths, adjusted her headset and connected with a network of informants. "There's word that the Loyalists are planning a full-scale assault," she reported in a hushed urgency. "They're determined to crush any sign of rebellion before it gains momentum, and more worryingly, Alejandro might be leading the charge personally." Her eyes met Sam's, conveying both the gravity of the situation and a silent plea for resilience. Amidst the strategic discussions, Sam's thoughts turned inward. The realization that her entire existence, crafted through deception, betrayal, and hidden lineage, had culminated in this moment, sent a shiver down her spine. Every memory, every tear shed in solitude, every rebellious ride along deserted highways had led her to this precipice. Now, as the leader of a coalition seeking change, she felt the dual burden of legacy and possibility. Her heart pounded with the weight of responsibility, yet a spark of fierce determination ignited within her. Gathering the group around her, Sam's voice rang out, steady and resolute. "Today, we stand together not just to confront an enemy, but to reclaim our future. Every sacrifice, every loss has brought us to this moment. We are the storm that will break the chains of tyranny." Her declaration resonated in the room, stirring hope even as the threat of violence loomed large. Outside, as the first drops of rain began to fall, a convoy of armored vehicles, laden with Alejandro's enforcers, rumbled toward the safe house. The sound of engines merging with the pitter-patter of rain set a rhythmic cadence to the tension that had been building for days. Marco, peering through binoculars, noted the approach with a furrowed brow. "They're coming faster than we thought," he announced, his voice laced with urgency. The safe house became a flurry of final preparations. Positions were assigned, escape routes mapped out, and weapons checked with meticulous care. In a quiet corner, Luca and Jess exchanged a determined nod, aware that every decision in the coming hours could tip the scales between victory and utter ruin. The flickering light of a single overhead lamp cast long shadows across their faces, underscoring the gravity of the situation. Inside, as the rain intensified and the first flashes of lightning illuminated the tense faces of the assembled rebels, Sam closed her eyes for a moment. She recalled the haunting image of a lone wolf under a crimson sky, a symbol that had punctuated her dreams since the revelation of her true identity. That wolf was not a creature to be tamed, but one that forged its own destiny, guided by instinct and unyielding spirit. Opening her eyes, Sam met the determined gazes of her companions. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," she said quietly, each word deliberate and charged with meaning. We're fighting for every soul oppressed by fear. We're fighting to end the cycle of violence once and for all." Her words reverberated through the room like a battle cry, a call to arms that left no room for doubt. At that precise moment, the door of the safe house shattered inward with the force of an explosion. The first wave of Alejandro's enforcers had arrived, storming in with coordinated precision. Chaos erupted. Gunfire shattered the silence. Shouts and cries mingled with the relentless rain. In the ensuing pandemonium, every member of the coalition braced for the conflict that would define their lives. As Sam steeled herself for the confrontation ahead, she knew that the peak of tension had arrived. This was the moment when every secret, every lie, and every suppressed emotion would be laid bare in the crucible of battle. With unwavering resolve, she gripped her weapon, ready to lead her newfound family into the storm. A storm that promised either liberation or a final, crushing defeat. The chaos outside the safe house had erupted into a full-blown battlefield. Rain hammered down relentlessly as gunfire and shouts clashed with the howling wind. Inside, Sam and her coalition of rebels fought desperately against Alejandro's enforcers, their every move a dance between life and death. The safe house, once a symbol of hope, now pulsed with the raw energy of impending transformation. In the midst of the melee, Sam found herself in the center of a swirling vortex of combat. Bullets whizzed past as she advanced through the narrow corridor, her heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and dread. Every step was heavy with the realization that this was the moment that would determine the fate of not only her legacy, but also the future of everyone oppressed under Alejandro's ruthless rule. As she rounded a corner, a figure emerged from the darkness. A tall, imposing man with eyes that burned with a fierce intensity. It was Alejandro himself, the mastermind behind the cartel, and, unknowingly, the father she had spent her entire life avoiding. For a heartbeat, time seemed to suspend. The man who had haunted the fringes of her existence now stood face to face with her, his presence commanding and terrifying. "Alejandro," Sam breathed, her voice echoing in the charged air. "This ends tonight." The cartel boss's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You think you can break free from the bloodline that defines you?" he sneered. His tone was both mocking and filled with a tragic sadness. A man who believed that power, no matter how brutal, was his birthright. "You're nothing without me, Sam. You're my legacy, the living proof that I can bend fate to my will." For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. Around them, the battle raged. Allies and foes clashed in a cacophony of gunfire and shattered glass, the storm outside mirroring the inner tempest of the confrontation. Sam's grip tightened on her weapon, but more than that, her eyes blazed with a determination that had been forged through years of rejection and hidden truths. "I reject that legacy," she declared, her voice unwavering despite the maelstrom surrounding her. "I am more than the sum of your sins. I choose to define who I am, and tonight I claim my destiny." Alejandro's enforcer, who had trailed closely behind, stepped forward. For a moment, it seemed as though the world would hold its breath as father and daughter squared off. Alejandro's eyes flickered with an emotion that was almost regretful, a recognition of the inevitability of this moment. "You were never meant to know the truth," he murmured, almost to himself. "But now that you do, there is no going back." As the duel of words gave way to a physical confrontation, the corridor became their personal arena. With lightning-fast reflexes, Sam dodged a wild swing from Alejandro, countering with a forceful strike that sent him staggering back against a crumbling wall. The impact echoed through the building, a stark punctuation in the symphony of battle. Each blow they exchanged was laden with years of repressed emotion, betrayal, and the desperate longing for redemption. The rebels outside intensified their assault on Alejandro's remaining forces. Explosions rattled the structure as chaos and courage intertwined. In the midst of the firefight, Marco's voice came through over the din, urging the coalition to press on. "This is our chance. Don't let him regain control." His call galvanized the fighters, reinforcing that every moment was pivotal. Inside, as Alejandro recovered, his eyes locked onto Sam with renewed fury. "You are my daughter, my blood. You cannot defy the very essence of who you are," he roared, unleashing a series of calculated strikes aimed to subdue her quickly. But Sam, fueled by the resolve of her past and the promise of a freer future, met every blow with unyielding strength. With each parry and counter, she dismantled the force that had defined her for so long. In a climactic exchange, Sam disarmed her father, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. The silence that followed was deafening, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the revolution unfolding outside. For a long, heart-wrenching moment, Alejandro and Sam stood locked in a stare, two souls bound by blood, caught in a struggle between an oppressive past and a future yet to be written. "Your time is over, Alejandro," Sam said softly, the finality in her voice resonating with everyone who listened. "I am not your puppet. I am the master of my own fate." With one swift, decisive move, she forced him to his knees, symbolically severing the chains of his dominion. As sirens wailed and the echoes of battle grew louder, Alejandro's eyes filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. In that fleeting instant, he seemed to recognize the magnitude of his own downfall, the realization that his relentless pursuit of power had led only to isolation and ruin. Outside, the coalition's victory began to take shape. The remaining loyalists, witnessing their leader's defeat, faltered and eventually surrendered. The revolution that had long simmered beneath the surface now roared to life, a tide of hope and retribution that could not be stopped. Amid the smoke and debris, as rain washed away the remnants of conflict, Sam knelt before her father, not out of submission, but to assert that the past was no longer a chain that would bind her future. In that transformative moment, the legacy of blood and tyranny was finally broken, replaced by the promise of a new era defined by truth, justice, and the resilience of the human spirit. In the aftermath of the decisive battle, the world seemed to exhale a long-held breath. The rain had washed away the dust and blood of conflict, and as the first rays of a hopeful dawn broke over the horizon, a sense of renewal began to spread like wildfire. The safe house, once a fortress of secrecy and tension, now stood as a symbol of rebirth, a place where the old order had been shattered and a new future was taking shape. Sam, still catching her breath from the climactic showdown, surveyed the scene with a mixture of sorrow and quiet pride. Around her, the remnants of Alejandro's regime lay scattered like broken chains. Her father, defeated and humbled, had been taken into custody by those who had once trembled at his name. In that moment, Sam realized that her journey was never solely about revenge. It was about reclaiming her identity and redefining a legacy that had long been written in darkness. As the coalition began to organize the chaos into order, Marco and Luca worked side by side, gathering information and ensuring that every rebel had a role in the dawn of this new era. Jess, ever the resourceful mediator, reached out to allies across the fractured criminal underworld, urging them to consider a future built on principles of justice rather than cruelty. Together, they formed the foundation of a movement dedicated not only to dismantling the remnants of tyranny, but also to healing the wounds that had festered for generations. In a quiet moment away from the tumult, Sam found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this turning point. The long nights of uncertainty, the agonizing betrayals, and the moments of fierce confrontation had all converged into a singular truth, that every scar, every whispered secret, and every act of defiance had been a necessary step toward liberation. She thought of her mother, the silent guardian of her past, whose sacrifices had been hidden behind layers of deceit. In honoring that memory, Sam resolved that the new era would not be marked by endless violence, but by a commitment to rebuilding and redemption. Across the city, communities once gripped by fear began to stir with cautious optimism. News of Alejandro's fall spread like wildfire, igniting sparks of rebellion among those who had long suffered under his ruthless reign. The people, ordinary men and women, artisans and laborers, dreamers and fighters, saw in Sam's victory a beacon of hope. They recognized that change was not an abstract idea, but a tangible possibility, born out of courage and unity. In the days that followed, makeshift gatherings turned into organized councils. Sam, once a solitary biker, became the reluctant leader of a revolution that spanned beyond the borders of the underworld. With her guiding presence, former adversaries began to forge alliances based on trust and shared aspirations. Marco's sharp intellect and steadfast loyalty, Luca's insider wisdom and reformed spirit, and Jess's extensive network all coalesced into the building blocks of a new society, one that valued transparency, compassion, and accountability. Yet amid the optimism, Sam knew that healing would be a long and arduous process. The scars of the past could not be erased overnight, and there would be challenges in uniting those whose lives had been fractured by fear and betrayal. But as she looked into the eyes of her allies and the faces of a community ready to rebuild, she felt an unwavering certainty that they could overcome the darkness together. Standing atop a modest platform in the center of a bustling square, Sam addressed the gathered crowd with a voice that resonated with both resolve and empathy. "Today marks the end of an era defined by violence and secrets," she declared, "but it is also the beginning of a journey toward healing, a journey that we will walk together, forging a future where every voice is heard and every life is valued. We have shattered the chains of our past, and now we have the power to create a world of truth, justice, and hope." Her words were met with a wave of cheers and tearful acknowledgements as people from all walks of life stepped forward to embrace the promise of a better tomorrow. The revolution was no longer just a fight for power. It had become a movement for transformation, where each individual was both a guardian of the past and a builder of the future. As the sun rose higher, bathing the city in warm light, Sam took a moment to pause and reflect. The battle had been long and fraught with sacrifice, but the path ahead shimmered with the potential of new beginnings. The legacy of Alejandro's reign was finally giving way to a future that belonged to the people, a future where hope could flourish in the fertile ground of redemption. Before the scene faded into the hopeful hum of rebuilding, Sam's final words echoed like a call to action for all who witnessed the change. "Our journey does not end here. It begins anew with each one of you. Stand up, be heard, and let your light guide us forward. If you believe in the power of truth and the promise of tomorrow, join us in this revolution of hearts and minds. Subscribe to our cause, share our story, and together, let's build the future we deserve."